Professor Glexnar Quibzort adjusted his formal tentacle sleeves as he glided into Lecture Hall 7 Gamma. His 7 eyes blinked in sequence, a nervous tic he'd developed over 3 centuries of academic life. Today marked the beginning of his 500th semester teaching impossible species, separating myth from reality at Galactic University, the most prestigious institution in the Orion Arm. "Professor, your liquid nitrogen is getting cold," called his assistant Blort, a gelatinous cube with remarkable organizational skills despite having no discernible brain. "Thank you, Blort. Where would I be without you?" Quibzort gurgled appreciatively, dipping his breathing tendril into the steaming cup. The lecture hall filled with students of 57 different species. Some floated, some crawled, some existed primarily as mathematically complex energy patterns, the usual diverse bunch. Quibzort felt the familiar thrill of academic superiority wash over him. "Welcome, minds of tomorrow," he began, his voice modulator set to distinguished authority mode. "I am Professor Quibzort, 12-time winner of the Galactic Mythology Award and author of the definitive text Creatures That Never Were, a rational approach to cross-cultural myths." A ripple of impressed telepathic murmurs swept through the room. "This semester, we will explore the most persistent myths across our shared galactic heritage. We'll analyze the quantum unicorns of Betelgeuse, the sentient mathematics of Tau Ceti, and of course," he paused dramatically, "the most fascinating mythological species of all, the humans." "Humans." From the back row, Blort made a barely audible squelching sound. Quibzort ignored him. "No other imaginary species has captured the imagination of so many civilizations. None has inspired such ridiculous claims. And none provides a better lens through which to understand the psychological needs that drive myth-making." The professor activated his hovering display sphere, bringing up his prized collection of human artifacts, objects misidentified by gullible amateurs as evidence of human existence. "My own research on the human myth has been called groundbreaking, revolutionary. The final word." Each descriptor sent a pleasant vibration through his pride gland. Little did Quibzort know that his 5 centuries of respected academic work were about to collapse faster than a neutron star with commitment issues. 3 weeks later, Professor Quibzort practically danced into the lecture hall. Today was Human Day, his favorite lecture of every semester. "Students, prepare yourselves for the most entertaining class of the year," he announced, his central eye dilated with excitement. "Today we discuss the absurd biological impossibility known as humans." The display sphere glowed as it projected what Quibzort insisted was the most accurate reconstruction of a human, a bizarre amalgamation of features that looked like someone had assembled a creature while reading the instructions backward. "Note the completely implausible bipedal stance," he began, his tentacles gesturing dramatically. "Allegedly balanced on just 2 appendages. The supposed evolutionary record offers no explanation for how such an unstable configuration would develop. 2 legs? Ridiculous. Even the notoriously dim-witted floblorbs of Epsilon Eridani have the sense to grow 17. The class erupted in laughter. A crystalline student in the front row shattered slightly from amusement before reforming. And their supposed respiratory system. Breathing only oxygen? A single element? How would such a species survive any planetary atmospheric variation? They wouldn't. It's biologically impossible. Quibzort activated the animation sequence, showing humans performing various activities, all rendered with the scientific accuracy of a child's crayon drawing. "Now observe these alleged behaviors. The myths claim humans built spacecraft and achieved interstellar travel using nothing but combustion and primitive atomic energy. Without psychic navigation, cosmic string manipulation, or even basic dimensional folding. Next, they'll claim these creatures traveled by flapping their arms very fast." A gaseous student near the ceiling condensed slightly from laughing too hard. "Let us not forget their supposed communication vibrating air molecules to transmit information. Can you imagine the inefficiency? The signal degradation over distances greater than a few body lengths would make complex communication impossible. Yet the myths claim they built whole civilizations this way. Quibzort clicked his mandibles together, his version of a contemptuous snort. And my personal favorite absurdity, their supposed consumption of H2O as a primary biological requirement. Liquid water, the universal solvent, essentially drinking acid. What kind of evolutionary path would lead to that? He paused, waiting for the inevitable question. A timid plantoid student raised a vine. But Professor, if humans are so obviously impossible, why do so many ancient texts mention them? Excellent question, Quibzort exclaimed, perhaps too enthusiastically. Ancient civilizations used the human myth to explain the unexplainable. Mysterious ruins? Humans built them. Incomprehensible technology. Human artifacts. It's the galactic equivalent of blaming ghosts for missing socks. As he continued dissecting the patently absurd features of human anatomy and society, Blort quietly organized papers in the back, occasionally making that same uncertain squelching sound. Remember, students, Quibzort concluded with professorial gravitas, the most dangerous myth is the one that seems almost plausible. Humans are the perfect academic case study, just plausible enough for the gullible, yet obviously impossible to the educated mind. The class applauded appreciatively. No one noticed the lecture hall door quietly opening or the strange figures slipping inside. The departmental notification arrived during Quibzort's morning meditation float. His eye stalks twitched irritably as he absorbed the news. 3 transfer students would be joining his class mid-semester. Irregular, unprofessional, disruptive to his meticulously structured curriculum. Blort, he gurgled after summoning his assistant. We have 3 new students arriving today. Names are Mick Johnson, Elena Vasquez, and Tamal Patel. Strange designations. Probably from the Outer Rim. Make sure they understand my class requires serious academic rigor. Blort's gelatinous form undulated uncertainly. Professor, I checked the registration system. There's no record of their previous academic history. Administrative oversight, obviously. The astrobiology department is always trying to dump their underperformers into mythology, as if my field is somehow less rigorous. Quibzort huffed, releasing a small cloud of indignant spores. Later that day, as Quibzort explained why the concept of human families was clearly based on misunderstandings of quantum entanglement, the lecture hall door squeaked open. 3 figures entered, wrapped in the voluminous hooded robes often worn by methane-breathing species. They moved with strange, jerky motions, walking oddly upright instead of proper floating or undulating. You must be the transfer students, Quibzort said disapprovingly. Find seats quickly. We're discussing the biological impossibility of human reproduction. One of the robed figures raised what appeared to be an appendage. Actually, Professor, I had a question about your earlier point regarding human water consumption. The voice was strange, oddly resonant, with peculiar inflections. Yes, well, as I was explaining, the notion of a carbon-based life form requiring liquid water is. But couldn't a carbon-based metabolism evolve to use water as a solvent if the organism developed appropriate cellular protections? The figure interrupted. Quibzort's central eye twitched. Perhaps in theory, but the energy requirements would be prohibitive. Now, if we could return to... And regarding bipedal locomotion, another robed figure chimed in. Couldn't an intelligent species evolve from tree-dwelling ancestors where bipedalism had already developed as an adaptation? The professor's color deepened to an irritated purple. That's an extremely simplistic view that ignores gravitational constants and balance mechanics. I've published 14 papers on the subject. Over the following weeks, the strange new students continued disrupting his carefully honed lectures with increasingly specific questions. They questioned his assertions about human cognitive limits, technological capabilities, and social structures. They brought obscure references Quibzort had never encountered. Worst of all, they seemed immune to his withering academic condescension. Meanwhile, odd incidents multiplied across campus. The cafeteria reported unprecedented theft of liquid water. Maintenance complained about dormitory waste disposal systems clogged with strange fibrous materials. The chemistry department discovered someone had accessed their labs at night, analyzing atmospheric compositions. Blort, Quibzort grumbled after a particularly contentious class, "Those transfer students are undermining my authority. Their questions are oddly specific, as if they have some agenda." "Perhaps they're just enthusiastic," Professor Blort suggested, though his gelatinous form seemed unusually agitated. Enthusiasm is one thing. Challenging established academic consensus is quite another, Quibzort spluttered. "And have you noticed they never remove those environmental suits, even in neutral atmosphere zones?" "About that," Professor Blort began hesitantly. "I've noticed something strange about their movements, and their dormitories' environmental controls have been modified to maintain unusual conditions. High oxygen, moderate temperature, specific humidity levels." Quibzort waved a dismissive tentacle. "Probably some obscure methane-breathing variant with peculiar needs. I'm more concerned about their disruptive influence on my other students." But Professor Blort persisted, "Those environmental settings match exactly what your own research describes as the theoretical conditions for." "Enough. I have a reputation to maintain, Blort. I won't have my definitive work on human mythology undermined by some contrarian students from the galactic backwater." As Quibzort swept out of the room, Blort's gelatinous form quivered with unmistakable concern. Blort had served Professor Quibzort for 73 years, maintaining a perfect record of administrative competence and professional discretion. He prided himself on anticipating the professor's needs before Quibzort himself knew them. But today, Blort was doing something unprecedented. He was investigating his supervisor's students. Outside dormitory complex Z9, Blort hesitated. What he was about to do violated at least 17 university protocols. If he were caught, his perfect employment record would be ruined. But the anomalies surrounding the transfer students had become too numerous to ignore. Gathering his courage, which, being gelatinous, meant literally consolidating his courage molecules into his central mass, Blort oozed under the door seal. The dormitory's interior was shockingly modified to maintain what the professor called mythological conditions. Temperature, uncomfortably warm. Atmosphere, oxygen-rich. Humidity, liquid water actually suspended in the air. And the furnishings, flat surfaces for resting instead of proper suspension fields, crude tools for manipulating objects, and most disturbing of all, containers of water placed casually about, as if the dangerous substance were harmless. "Hello, Blort, we've been expecting you." The voice came from behind him. Blort turned, which, for a gelatinous cube, meant flowing in the opposite direction, to find the three robed figures standing in a semicircle. "We figured someone would eventually notice," said the one called Mick, reaching up to pull back his hood. Blort's entire body went translucent with shock. Beneath the hood was not a methane-breathing Zorgax or a radiation-dwelling Fulbatite, but something impossibly familiar from the professor's lectures: a head with forward-facing eyes, external sound receptors, and a bizarre arrangement of facial features exactly matching the humans from Quibzort's supposedly fictional reconstructions. "This is impossible," Blort bubbled faintly. "You cannot exist." "Yet here we stand," said Elena, removing her hood as well. "On two legs, no less." Tumul grinned, a terrifying display of exposed calcium structures. "Guess your professor's definitive work needs some revision." Over the next hour, Blort's understanding of galactic history underwent a complete reformation. The humans explained their actual origins, their development on Earth, and their recent tentative steps into the wider galactic community. "But why enroll in the professor's class?" Blort asked, still struggling to process the existential crisis rippling through his cytoplasm. We discovered his work while researching how galactic society might perceive us, Mick explained. His definitive refutation of the human myth is actually required reading at our diplomatic academy as an example of how deeply misunderstood we are. We thought it would be enlightening to experience his class firsthand, added Elena. Though we didn't expect quite this level of misconception. The professor will never believe this, Blort said, his gelatinous form quivering with distress. His entire academic reputation is built on humans being mythological. That's why we need your help, Tamal said. The reveal needs to be handled carefully. Professor Quibzord is respected throughout the galaxy. His endorsement would legitimize human integration into the galactic community. Blort attempted to inform the professor the next day, approaching him with uncharacteristic nervousness. Professor, about those transfer students. Not now, Blort. I'm preparing my keynote for the Interstellar Mythology Conference. My presentation on definitive proof of human non-existence will silence those fringe theorists from the archaeology department once and for all. But, Professor, there's something critically important. More important than the culmination of my life's work? I think not. Quibzort snapped, all 7 eyes blinking asynchronously in irritation. Those transfer students have been feeding absurd theories to my other students. Just yesterday, a Photiad sophomore suggested humans might have actually visited the Proxima system. The very idea. About that, sir. I've had enough disruption. Tomorrow's lecture will settle this matter permanently. I've prepared a comprehensive breakdown of why bipedal, water-drinking, oxygen-breathing creatures cannot possibly evolve naturally. After that, I expect those troublesome transfers will either accept established science or transfer to the creative fiction department where they belong. As Quibzort swept away in a cloud of academic indignation, Blort's gelatinous form drooped with resignation. The professor was headed for the most spectacular academic downfall in galactic history, and there was nothing Blort could do to stop it. Professor Quibzord entered Lecture Hall 7 Gamma the next day with the confidence of someone about to deliver the academic equivalent of a supernova. His tentacles were freshly moisturized, his ceremonial sash displayed all 27 of his academic medals, and his presentation sphere was loaded with 500 years of meticulously curated evidence. Today, students, he announced grandly, we will put to rest once and for all the persistently annoying human question. I have prepared a 97-point refutation that will conclusively demonstrate the biological, physical, and logical impossibility of human existence. The lecture hall was unusually crowded. Word had spread about the ongoing tension between the professor and the mysterious transfer students, drawing spectators from other departments. Even Dean Vorblax was present, his psychic observation tendrils extended with interest. Quibzort noticed the 3 robed figures sitting in the front row. Perfect. Let them witness the intellectual destruction of their contrarian theories up close. Point 1, he began triumphantly. The supposed human respiratory system requires free oxygen in concentrations that would be combustible in the presence of the simplest energy source. Any planet with such an atmosphere would experience constant, devastating fires. One of the robed figures raised an appendage. Query, what if the oxygen were balanced by other atmospheric elements and the planet had developed abundant water to suppress fires? Irrelevant. Quibzort dismissed. Point 2, the myth claims humans walked upright on 2 legs, that carrying their sensory organs at the top of their bodies, a completely unstable arrangement that would result in constant falling and injury. Another robed figure raised an appendage. Query, couldn't evolutionary pressure select for sophisticated balance mechanisms, especially for a species that supposedly evolved from tree-dwelling ancestors? The professor's color darkened to an irritated magenta. You're ignoring the mathematical certainty of gravitational effects. Point 3, human myths claim they consumed liquid water as their primary biological requirement. This is patently absurd, as water is a universal solvent that would break down any conceivable organic structure. Query, came the now familiar interruption. If their cellular structures evolved with appropriate protections, couldn't water be safely incorporated into their biological processes? A murmur ran through the class. The questions were oddly specific and surprisingly logical. Quibzort's presenting tentacle trembled slightly. You're proposing increasingly improbable evolutionary pathways. The statistical likelihood of such a creature evolving naturally approaches zero. Query, is approaching zero the same as impossible? The professor's eye stalks quivered with frustration. I have devoted 5 centuries to this field. My research is definitive. Humans are mythological constructs. That's when it happened. The 3 robed figures stood up simultaneously and moved to the center of the lecture space. Professor Quibzort, said the one called Mick, we believe it's time for a practical demonstration. In perfect unison, they removed their environmental robes. The lecture hall erupted in chaos. Students gasped, screamed, teleported in panic, or froze in crystalline shock. A luminal being in the back row became so agitated it accidentally ascended to a higher dimensional plane. Standing before them were 3 creatures matching exactly the mythological reconstructions. From the professor's own teaching materials, bipedal, with 4 limbs, forward-facing eyes, and the characteristic arrangement of facial features Quibzort had spent centuries dismissing as biologically impossible. Greetings, said Elena, smiling pleasantly. We are representatives of the United Earth Diplomatic Corps. Humans are quite real, and we've recently achieved the technological advancements necessary to join the wider galactic community. Professor Quibzort made a strange gurgling sound. All 7 of his eyes had dilated to maximum size, and his tentacles hung limply at his sides. But this is impossible, he finally managed, his voice modulator skipping to a higher register. I've mathematically proven, my research conclusively shows. Your research was impressively thorough, Tommel acknowledged, for someone working without actual specimens. You were correct about approximately 17% of human biology and culture, which is remarkable given the constraints. Dean Vorblax floated forward, psychic tendrils extended in fascination. Extraordinary. Professor, did you have advanced knowledge of this revelation? Quibzort's color had faded to a sickly pale green. 5 centuries of academic certainty were collapsing around him. His definitive texts, his landmark papers, his 14 honorary degrees, all based on the absolute conviction that humans were mythological. He stuttered, then toppled sideways into a puddle of academic mortification. From the back of the room, Blort approached, carrying a rehydration solution suitable for shell-shocked professors. As he tended to his collapsed superior, he looked up at the humans and bubbled softly, "You could have been gentler about it." Maybe, Elena admitted, but his last paper called us the fabricated fantasy of underdecorated pseudoscientists and attention-seeking frauds. Academic discourse goes both ways, Professor. 6 months later, Professor Quibzort adjusted his newly designed adaptive collar in accommodation for his recently diagnosed cognitive dissonance syndrome. The university therapist had assured him the periodic episodes of existential vertigo would eventually subside. Your Introduction to Human Studies class is scheduled to begin in 10 minutes, Professor Blort reminded him, offering a stabilizing tentacle. Thank you, Blort. Is the cultural attaché from Earth present? MS. Vasquez is already in the lecture hall setting up the demonstration materials. Quibzort nodded, still finding the bobbing motion strange after centuries of proper tentacle-based gestures. But adaptation was necessary now. The great revelation, as the galactic media had termed it, had transformed him overnight from respected mythologist to, well, something entirely different. The lecture hall was packed beyond capacity. Students from every department crowded the aisles, many using perception-enhancing apparatus to ensure they didn't miss a moment. In the front row sat 3 representatives from the Galactic Academic Oversight Committee, their evaluation tentacles extended. Welcome to Galactic University's first accredited course in human studies, Quibzort began. his voice modulator carefully calibrated to project confident expertise rather than the lingering academic trauma he still felt. I am Professor Zort, recently appointed as the first chair of the Human Integration Department. The irony was lost on no one. Galactic media had gleefully reported on the mythology professor's cosmic error for weeks. His colleagues had alternated between sympathy and barely concealed schadenfreude. Only his unexpected pivot embracing his unique position as the galaxy's foremost expert on human misconceptions had saved his career. Today's lecture will address common misunderstandings about human biology, with special emphasis on their unusual water-based metabolism, he continued. As the author of Corrections to 5 Centuries of Misunderstanding, I am uniquely positioned to help you understand where traditional galactic science went wrong. His recently published retraction and analysis had become the fastest-selling academic text in galactic history. Nothing drove book sales like spectacular academic failure followed by radical reinvention. Elena Vasquez, now officially the human ambassador to Galactic University, stepped forward. Thank you, Professor. I believe your insights into why galactic science was so resistant to the possibility of our existence have been invaluable to both sides. Zort's color warmed slightly with the first genuine academic pride he'd felt in months. When one's entire field is upended, one has 2 choices, denial or adaptation. I've chosen the latter, though I still maintain that humans are statistically improbable. We get that a lot, Elena laughed. Being called statistically improbable is actually a step up from mythological fabrication. As the lecture progressed, Zort found himself genuinely engaged in the material. The humans were fascinating not despite their biological oddities but because of them. Their improbable evolutionary path had created unique perspectives and problem-solving approaches previously unknown in galactic science. After class, Dean Vorblax approached him, psychic tendrils pulsing with approval. Remarkable recovery, Zort. The Oversight Committee is impressed. They're fast-tracking your proposal for the Human Cultural Exchange Program. Thank you, Dean. It seemed the logical response to an unprecedented situation. Indeed. Though I must ask, how does it feel to have your life's work so thoroughly redirected? Zort's eye stalks drooped slightly, catastrophic at first. But there's a certain freedom in academic reinvention. When everything you thought you knew is proven wrong, every new discovery becomes genuinely exciting again. As they parted, Zort reflected on the strange trajectory his career had taken. For 5 centuries, he'd been the galaxy's foremost expert on why humans couldn't possibly exist. Now he was becoming the galaxy's foremost expert on actual humans. The ultimate irony came 2 weeks later when the Galactic Science Academy announced the nominees for the prestigious Reality Perception Award. There, among the 5 finalists, was Professor Glexnar Zort, nominated for his groundbreaking work in human integration studies. He'd spent his career studying myths, only to have reality barge into his classroom wearing improbable bipedal forms and demanding recognition. And somehow, against all academic probability, he'd adapted. As Blort would later observe in his best-selling memoir, The Professor and the Impossible Species, when reality contradicts your research, true scientists don't change reality, they change their research. And sometimes, if they're very lucky, they get a second chance to be right about something they were spectacularly wrong about before.